morning and happy New Year. I don't care that February is almost in sight. I'm still saying Happy New Year because I feel festive. Good morning, Mincy.
Good morning, Whaley.
How are you?
I'm very, very well, thank you. All the better.
Did you enjoy the festive period that you're not supposed to celebrate?
Yeah, I love the festive period because your lot are slightly less miserable than you are all year round. So it's lovely. Yeah. You know.
We're full of joy.
And I just want to say thank you for all the Christmas presents you came to deliver, Simon. It's really appreciated.
George is genuine. We'll come to you, Ben, in a second. We're not being rude in many ways. Every year, Mincy comes round and he delivers, like a Jewish Santa, he delivers a big pack of normally Greggs or chocolates, basically stuff that's going to wind my kids up. And he always makes the point as he leaves, I've yet to get one back from Whaley, which I found a little bit...
It's fine. I'm the bigger person. I get it.
You are. I endorse that message. You are a bigger person. Right. Talking of big bearded people who are wonderful and get round your house in the middle of the night, we got Ben from Hat and Home.
Morning. Nice to see you, Jen.
Sorry, I messed up there. The multi-award-winning Hat and Home.
Don't forget that, Simon. Lovely to spend Sunday morning with you, gentlemen. I couldn't think of anything better to do.
That is just so laced with sarcasm. I don't know where to start. Anyway, okay.
We're obviously all so busy. This is the only time we can fit it in, yeah.
As I say all the time, if you've want an excuse to get away from your family on Sunday, this is it.
Yeah, quite right. I had a lovely Christmas, mate. Thank you. I took the kids and the family away, so we were away for Christmas in the sunshine, which was great.
Oh, lovely. Great. Well, that's even better. Well, we're here to talk about a few important things, but I think we need to start with the most important one of all. The fact that you win loads of awards. Ben, you do fantastically well, don't you? Obviously, you did great at the negotiator again. You've always had a really strong element there, and we can see just behind you the thing that jumps out for me, both on the wall and behind it, this fantastic the hat emblem logo that signifies your agency. There, you were kind enough to share with me your entry and just the massive amount of flexibility that comes from. And one of my just simple questions was, how important is it these days to be a marketeer as an agent? Can you get away with it just by focusing on good service, or do you think that it's an integral part of a successful agency today?
Oh, you can get away with it without it, but whether you grow and whether you generate a new customer base for yourself is a different matter. When I launched Hat and Home, there were two things that were absolutely vital to me: brand and people. Yeah. In equal measure. And the brand, brand is more than branding. Branding's, your color scheme, your logo, how you have your boards. But a brand is about how it makes somebody or your customer base feel about you. And that's, for us to be able to have that hat image and use it with such agility in so much of what we do, it means that people start recognizing the hat as the brand, and they start recognizing what that means. It means good service. It means a contemporary agency. It means progressive. It means innovation. On our boards, for instance, we don't have Hat and Home plastered on there. We've got 4 different color boards. We don't use the same one. We've literally got our logo, the big bowler hat on the boards with sale or rent on there. And what we wanted people to do is start, dare I say, a bit like Apple or the Night Tick. If they can just start recognizing the bowler hat, then you're kind of winning as a brand.
So where did the bowler hat come from? Because that's quite I mean, you're obviously very.
Are you talking specifically here? Where did he steal it from?
Yeah, who did you steal? No. Well, why did you decide the bowler hat? Because it is quite a traditional image, isn't it? And you're anything but a traditional agent. And I think other brands in the past, if I'm not mistaken, have used. I mean, I'm going back years now to when you weren't even born, but like Bradford and Bingley, they were like what were they, like a mortgage company or something? I think they used to use the bowler hats back then, but then it stood for really sort of like professional and very traditional kind of city gent lifestyle.
Yeah, I think let's not forget Laurel and Hardy as well, gents.
Okay, yeah, true.
when again we were composing the brand and working out exactly how we wanted to launch to market, the idea of the hat came from wherever you lay your hat, that's your home.
Yeah.
So, it doesn't matter whether you've got a mansion or a studio or a maisonette or whatever, when you come in and put your hat down, or I guess these days your keys on your phone, wherever you do that, that's your home. And home's an important thing and a special place and a personal thing for people. So we were chatting about, the phrase, wherever you lay your hat, that's your home. And obviously the fantastic Paul Young song from the 80s. We've actually got a Paul Young album in each of our offices looking down upon us like the Mona Lisa. We decided that was a great sort of thing to talk about. And then we said, well, if we're going to use hats, what hat do we use? I mean, it's because of the tradition that we actually use the bowler hat, because you say we're anything but traditional, but our service values and our customer service and our approach is traditional. We have very good service levels. We believe in a decent traditional approach. We are a traditional estate agency in such, but we softened it up a bit with the retro logos and sort of things like that. But it was supposed to stand for tradition and value, and I hope it does.
It does, Ben. And Ben, whenever I stumble on any good idea, I pretend it was part of the grand plan. Did you envisage from the beginning that it was going to be so flexible, or is just over time you realise that this is really it's really adaptable?
I think it was after our first campaign where we used different hats. So we wanted to talk about the reasons people move, because so much of estate agency advertising is about shouting at people about your fee or shouting about the price you can get. We wanted to talk about why people move. So we would have a baby's bonnet that said looking for a third bedroom.
Yeah.
So we didn't use the bowler quite so much back then. But I think after our first campaign, we realized we wanted that to be front and center of everything we did. So that's why we started going into 3D modeling of it, morphing of it. We've got some animation stuff coming up. We're working on another campaign at the moment. So I think it's I'd love to say it was always a grand plan, but probably it's something like in a lot of marketing, it develops over time.
Yeah, and Brandon people, anyone who was near your tables and it was tables at the Negotiator Awards, knows just how brilliant your people are as well. They've got a lot of energy, I think I would summarise it as.
They're an amazing bunch. We took 31 people to the Negotiator Awards this year, which was amazing because actually we took the whole team last year and there were only 16 of us. So we've doubled in size in terms of.
That's a great sign, isn't it? That's a wonderful sign of the progress. And did you do it? You took everyone, so this wasn't like it was a reward. No. Could you just highlight, because I'm a really big fan of getting as many people out to a party is basically what I live for. But that almost reward, what do they get out of it? I mean, obviously they have a fantastic night, but I imagine that creates a real buzz going forward that they want to be back there again the next year, don't they?
100%. They're all part of it. It doesn't matter who team that get these awards and win these awards. Everything we do and everything they do on a daily basis feeds into offering and delivering a brilliant service and a great result. And if you can take all your people to something like that, then let's do it. We kind of did it a bit like our Christmas party this year. So we had a smaller Christmas party rather than a bigger one. Yeah. But the guys were great. Of course, they love it. They all get dressed up for it. They arranged limos up to town. It was a brilliant night out. And then, it's not me who's doing this. It's them. It's all the people around me that are winning these awards. So I really, if I can get everybody there, I will. Depends how big we are next year, because it's not cheap.
It reminds me a lot of, I don't know if you've heard of the Australian big events called AREC. And what I find fascinating over there, obviously, there's a much more individual kind of associate broker model prevalent there in many places. But even in those companies, many of the staff themselves pay to go to that conference because it's so important and because they enjoy it, because the learnings they got and everything else there. So I think you'd like to see more of it, because there's a lot. Let's be honest, there's a lot of cynicism around conferences and awards, isn't it? And I think some of it's well placed. Some of them I think they need to adapt and change. But I think at its core is you can't get too curmudgeonly, can you, about celebrating that success, both of yourselves and against your peers in the industry.
100%. I like the idea of staff paying to go. We'll if some of them are listening to this, I'll see my phone starts buzzing away in a minute. Brilliant idea, Simon. Well done, you.
They used to say hello to me whenever I went in the office. Now I'm not going to get even away, am I?
Ben, if we could just I'm going to segue ourselves in a slightly more serious direction, but it goes back to you setting up the business in the first place. And I suppose it's worth us now talking about your diagnosis as well, because it's a real kind of watershed moment in your life. I read the story and I had no idea, as many people didn't. And you read it, and I think to myself, this is a guy who's had a diagnosis with a progressive illness. It's a neurological condition. And most of us, when we're hit with that sort of news, would slam the brakes on and think, okay, well, just the sheer overwhelm of that situation would put you into a state that you couldn't get things done. You did the exact opposite, and you went even sort of further. You threw yourself into launching business, which, first of all, I've got to say is absolutely brave. But where did that, just take us through that moment and that kind of reaction?
Okay.
And probably, Ben, give us a bit of background as well for those people that don't know.
Yeah, I will. So I was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease in 2020 when I was 41. For those of you who don't know, in a 20-second whistle-stop tour, Parkinson's is where some of the brain cells that produce a chemical called dopamine die. And that means your brain doesn't produce enough dopamine. Dopamine controls movement. So symptoms come that you get tremors, stiffness, slowness, speech problems, insomnia, all sorts of, there's about 40 different symptoms. And it's a progressive neurological condition. It gets worse over time. Nobody knows what actually causes it. And unfortunately, there's no cure at the moment, but we're on the road to changing that. And it usually affects older people in life. So there's about 150,000 people in the UK with Parkinson's. Only 1,850 are under the age of 50. Which is one of me. So
when I did for the first time ever on one of these shows, I actually did a bit of research, and that point about only 4% of people with Parkinson's are actually diagnosed before they're 50. So I suppose in one way I should say congratulations. You've stood up.
Thanks very much, Simon.
I've always been that again. But then the other amazing one was that 1 in 37 people in the UK has it. And I mean, we hear all those stats about, the other ones, but I'll admit I had no idea of that size and scale, that it was so prevalent.
It really is. And whenever you speak to anybody, unfortunately, you hear a lot, oh, my uncle had it, my auntie had it, my grandma had it. And I think it touches the lives of more people. And, because it affects most people in their 70s, and there's usually about a 10 to 15 year lifespan from diagnosis to passing away. I think it affects a lot of people for a short period. So, it's a nasty one, but coming back to David's point, Parkinson's it's a lifelong illness at the moment, okay? But it's not one where you have to suddenly go into a horrendous treatment. You don't have to have an operation, and it's not life-threatening immediately, okay? So most people, when they get a diagnosis that is life-impacting, have to either go in a hospital, go through some treatment, or have mortality and as a cloud over them. I didn't have that, so I actually felt it was quite a blessing to me, because I had all the stimulus to be able to say, I need to kick myself up the arse. What am I going to do in my life? Have I achieved? Am I true to myself? All this sort of jazz. But I didn't have to couple that with horrendous treatments and things. I had the choice to behave how I wanted to behave. So I was at Marsh & Parsons at the time. I'd been there 13 years. I was running a lot of offices. COVID was sweeping the world. And I thought, do you know what? I just want to do it the way I want to do it. I think for a while I'd felt that there was more I could bring to agency and do it in a different way. And I thought, well, if I'm going to do that, I need to do it on my own. And I'd been living out in a place called Wokingham in Berkshire, and traveling up to London every day for the last 12 years. And I thought, that's the market I want to start in. So Parkinson's for me was the catalyst for me opening my business. And I wouldn't look back. It's I know this sounds a bit contrived when you say it's the best thing that's ever happened to me. I wouldn't be doing anything without it.
You've said that there, and we went out for lunch with your partner Luke, and we were having a fantastic time, and I was doing all my lovely cheap gags and everything else, and then we got onto this, and you told that story in a similar way there, and that bit at the end you were saying, despite being given this life-changing condition here, you genuinely were able to turn that around into the positive, and almost setting those short-term goals rather than just let life drifting by. That sounds like what you're still in the same place with, yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I just I'm not saying how everybody should behave, but I behave in a certain way. I'm a positive individual. I'm a strong individual, and I won't let things get me down. But I will try and find the way through it that's going to improve my life. Now, there were lots of ways that I could have done that, but I chose that starting my own business, making sure I had a legacy for my wife and children, making sure I built something that I could be proud of, making sure I did estate agency the right way. Because I'm not going to be able to work forever. I know that. And it is the best thing that ever happened to me. I've got a great relationship with Parkinson's UK, the charity, and somebody there said to me the other day, it's great. You said it's the best thing that's ever happened to you, but what if you could go back and change it? And I still said, no, I wouldn't. Because if that hadn't have happened to me, I'd not be sitting here now. I wouldn't have the great team around me. I wouldn't have the business. It's given me that opportunity. So, you know what? Life's not perfect, but to me, I'm living my perfect life.
I think it's some of those films where they talk about, if you could know your allotted time. I mean, we're all hopeful, of course. There's a huge amount of research, some of it very exciting, into these neurodegenerative diseases, aren't they? Our friend Dom, has Huntington's, and there's a lot of links there and everything else. So we're all hoping on that. But just that basic point about you said there at the beginning, albeit people older normally 10 to 15 years. That's a really if that doesn't give you focus, nothing will.
It's exactly that, and very rarely are you given the ability to have that long-term focus.
Yeah.
So Ben, in terms of all the work that you've done to highlight the fantastic work done by the Parkinson's charities as well, you've got a massive initiative going on or about to go on. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
We have. So a couple of months ago, I launched a video on social media just about my story. And it got an overwhelming response. And I was contacted by so many different agents, but at all sort of levels of their businesses, saying my auntie's got Parkinson's, thanks for highlighting it, my uncle's got, whatever it may be. And there was an incredible amount of people in the industry that are affected by it. And if we're gonna cure this disease, Parkinson's UK need more money to be able to put into research. It's as simple as that. We can get there. There's amazing stuff happening, but they need more money. I can't do that on my own, and Hatton Home can't do it on our own. So what I wanted to do is get as many agents together as we can and do something called the Promise for Parkinson's, which is transactional giving. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be going out to agents in the UK, and if they care enough that they want to get involved, we're asking for a couple of quid per sale or let every year. So for transactional giving, it's a couple of quid, but if we get enough agents involved, we'll raise £1 million a year. So I am going to be knocking on people's doors. I am going to be using my contacts.
That's kind of your job as an estate agent, Ben.
Yeah, well, there you go. See if they want to sell at the same time. So I'm going out there, and it's, not everybody will want to get involved, but if anybody does want to get involved, we're going to set up a new platform. This Promise of Parkinson's, and we're going to say, look, just give what you can per transaction and commit to it. We do already. We give £10 a sale, £10 a let, £10 a mortgage for Parkinson's, amongst other things. But we've got to make sure that we smash it out of the park.
We've got a message here from your wingman, Mr. Christian Byfield, the Viking. A wing walk. Tell us about that. I've heard about it.
So we had about 20 people do a skydive last year. And the next stage on from a skydive is strapping yourself to the wing of a plane and going up there. So I don't know. I think Christian managed to volunteer himself unknowingly, and now he's locked in by contract. So he's a good man for doing it. But I think we'll have about 20, 25 people doing that in the spring. You two involved? Yeah, for
still less dangerous than a night out with Simon Whale. So I'll strap myself to a wing anytime.
Yeah. In the words of Jaws, Ben, you're going to need a bigger plane, I'm afraid. So that doesn't really work for us. I love the idea of transactional giving, and I was thinking about how we can best support you. I think obviously. I think we've seen so many of these stories that are important and relevant to people that it feels like actually Kerfuffle itself. Me and David were talking. We're going to set up our own charity category essentially on there, and what we're going to set up for you guys, obviously, is for the Promise of Parkinson's to have its own page that you can really rally support around that, and we can obviously promote it effectively from there. And I think from Kerfuffle's point of view, we'd like to get in on that basis as well. So, you know, any of the memberships that we give, we'll have a chat with you afterwards about how many tiny pennies I can give away for that. But I think it's such a fantastic one. I think that stat for me is the bit that hit home, was if 1 in 37 people is affected by it, that's everybody, you know, your friends and family, that, you know, your peer group is going to be more than 40 people, 37 people or whatever else anyway. So it's highly likely, as you said, you might not even know it, but here's the thing, awareness will bring that as well, won't it? So I think it's really, really laudable. And I think having somebody like your good self that has that positivity around it as well is again, something that will work really, really good hand in glove with it.
Thanks, guys. And I really appreciate it. Anything you guys can do to help us and get involved is brilliant. So thank you.
No worries at all. No worries at all. So apart from that, in terms of the kind of how have the staff got behind it as well, Ben? I mean, obviously they're going to be very supportive of you. Do they get involved in the process?
Oh, they are absolutely amazing. I mean, my team jump out of planes, bake cakes, and they've done abseils down Guildford Cathedral. We're doing a clay pigeon shoot in September. We do a charity quiz and auction where we raised $5,000 last year. So our aim is to raise, outside of Promise of Parkinson's, just for Hatton Home, is £250,000 by 2026, and we're on course for doing 100 this year, which is amazing. They get behind everything, and they don't need to, but they do because they're brilliant people.
That's great. That's really, really good.
So going back to business now, very, very briefly, Megan asked a tongue-in-cheek question here: when does the Reading branch open? But genuinely, though, you've had phenomenal growth in what has been a sort of an odd period of time for the estate agency industry, because we've been kind of finding our feet again post-COVID, and the market, there's never been a regular market really until perhaps now, where things are starting to sort of level off a bit. But you're growing a business in an uncertain climate. How much of that is just sort of gut feel and bravery, and how much of it do you feel that, no, you know, businesses only grow by having local presence in those key areas that you're looking to target?
Some of it's science, some of it's data led, some of it's gut feel. And, you know, I think in business, you've got to have a good gut feel about something. And I also think if you're building something on certain times, when the certain times come, you are ready to play, you know, and that's really important to us. So we're 3 years old next week, and we're 5 branches now, plus a prime sort of a high-end division, plus a mortgage brokerage. And the times have been uncertain. You know, we all know what's happened to transaction levels. It's been tough. But I'd much prefer to grow my team during those times and make sure that we are fit for, you know, match fit during tough times, because then, you know, when things ease off a bit, like they look like they're doing at the moment, it means that we'll be even more productive. So it's been hard. You know, it's that sort of growth in that sort of period of time is tough. But I've got, you know, Simon mentioned Luke earlier. Luke, who's my business partner, he's just incredible. You know, he is singly both the best estate agent and leader I've ever met. And I've got a management team who are so driven. You know, we talked about them being on the bus. My God, are they on the bus? And they're driving things forward. So if we can do that during the tough times, I don't see why we can't keep going. You know, when I started the business, I always thought, you know, people would say, "Do you ever think you'll have 5 branches?" You know, then they'd say, when you got 3, they'd say, "Do you ever think you got 10?" Well, I'm not sure where we end now. But yeah, I do think high street presence. You mentioned about seeing it. Yeah. I think high street presence is really important still. I know it's easy to say it's not. You don't get that many people walking in anymore. That's not the point. There's 2 things that are important about that. There's the trust of the public being able to see your agency. So there's trust that they can see your agency. They marry it up with the boards that they see, and they know you're there. The other really important thing, and I think this isn't talked about enough, it's a sales environment. We are a sales business. Yeah. We're not offering you're not a service business, we're a sales business. We still offer a great service, but we're about selling and letting, and you need to be in a sales environment. You put all your people at home on their own, Where's the camaraderie? Where's the competition? Where's the urgency? Where's the whiteboard? Where's the competition? It just doesn't work. So that for me is a really decent reason to have a high street office.
And how do you learn as well? You learn by osmosis on the job with other people as much as anything. I don't understand the career development for many of these jobs going forwards that do, work just from home. And I think your point about, and anyone who, I don't know if you've got it up there publicly, but you should have a look at what Ben's offices look like. I mean, they are outstanding. And I remember a bit of work we did in my Repit days when we teamed up with Samsung, and obviously they were looking at having the big screens. And we did a lot of research about actually, the amount of business that comes from walk-ins and everything else. And yes, look, the amount of walk-ins has gone like that. But what's interesting is, if they're taking the trouble to come into your office, you need to impress them enough, don't you? And that has got to be the biggest sign of a serious interest, hasn't it? If they're doing what very few people do these days, which is actually visit places.
I think it's when
they do walk in, if they're faced with.
Go on, Ben. Sorry.
I'm just saying, if they walk in and they're faced with the same old herringbone desks and somebody with a phone under their shoulder, and it's as much as they can do to sort of even say hello, and there's nowhere for them to properly sit, and there's nothing to look at. It's nerve-wracking walking into anywhere, especially in a estate agency. Yeah. They're likely to be making a big choice. They're either selling, letting, renting, whatever. It's a big choice. Why can't they come in, have a look around and go, this is a nice environment? Why can't we throw a record on the record player or have a go on the fruit machine first and then talk property? Because they've got to feel, somebody walking into your brand has got to feel an affinity with your brand. Yeah. They've got to feel that that's the sort of people they want to work with, And at the moment, there's too many estate agents out there who you don't feel anything from their offices. It just feels very nothing.
Or at least they just don't stand out. There's no purple cow, standing out from the crowd facility there as well as there. Ben, you're talking about Luke, who obviously you cited as one of the best agents, and I think it's worthwhile me blowing a bit of smoke here, because I can't even remember how it came up, but we were your name came up when I was talking to Peter Rawlings, and he said you were one of the best agents that he'd worked with, which I think about just about anybody would take as one of the greatest endorsements you can possibly get. First of all, I'm going to ask you the question: how much did you enjoy kind of working with him, and what do you think you gleaned from Peter Rawlings that maybe others didn't? And then secondly, as well, who are the people within the industry that you admire, who influence you? Obviously, present company excluded. This isn't about us. We don't do this for the self-glory. It's important. So yeah, just on the Peter Rawlings thing, I mean, that must make you. I think I've told you that before, but what is your time like with him?
Well, I was briefly at Foxtons, or I was for Foxton a while, briefly while Pete was still there, and then when he moved over to Marsh and Parsons, I followed in that way. Peter's had a huge influence on my estate agency career, but also how I see sales environments, how I reward people, how you measure performance. He's a true estate agent. He'll say that readily. Yeah. As amazing as he's done, with all the things he's done, he comes from a estate agency. He was on the ground, so he knows what it's like. Yeah. And he's consistent. He's absolutely consistent. And, whilst I don't agree with absolutely everything he would have done or will do, he is absolutely consistent in his approach. And so you knew where you were at M&P. You shaved. You didn't wear brown shoes. You made sure your car was immaculately clean at all times. You were never late for anything. And those sort of disciplines create a culture. Yeah. Because alongside that, we always got rewarded for when we did a great job. We always shouted out top performance. We always made sure there were incentives in place to make people work harder. And again, you start building a culture which is all about great work that brings great results for our clients equals great pay and great rewards. When I was at M&P, I started there as a negotiator. Okay. And I was there 13 years. And when I say people, I always say we built the company from 5 to 32 offices. I didn't, of course, that was not my responsibility, but I felt part of a team that did it. And anybody in those early, 5 to 10 years of M&P will remember that feeling that we were building this thing together. That's what it felt like. We all were on the same journey, and that was incredible. And that's what I feel a little bit with Hatton Home. Well, a lot with Hatton Home now. I feel that everybody's on that same journey of growth because we care about the little things. Peter cares about the little things a lot. I'm sure he won't mind me saying that. And you let them slide once, it's game over. We have he'll laugh at this because we have a whiteboard in every single one of our offices because there's something about going up to the whiteboard and writing up, I've got a brand instruction, or I've done a deal, or I've got a new FS lead, or whatever it is. There's that physicality of saying I've just had a win, So we make sure we have
that whole gamification celebration of success. It's massively important, isn't it? I think we're going to.
So he's brilliant. Yeah,
he's brilliant. Yeah, I mean, we're going to talk about Paul Smith's article in the Property Industry Eye later, and he highlights that one to watch. Foxtons has retaken the London Crown, and he quite rightly flags that Guy Gittins has obviously been as a key part of that. But I do think way before that, and I'm sure that Peter was absolutely at the core of it. Peter returning there, wasn't it? Has gone back to the basics, and that's why Foxtons is getting back to where it was. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Guy has done a great job in there. He did a great job at Chesterton's. He's done a great job here. They're going back to what proper estate agency is, and they're understanding what their core brand is, and they've done a great job of that. I think they've probably lost their way slightly for a while. Peter will have an influence on that, but I think it's being driven heavily by Guy, who I've got a lot of admiration for. They're going back to the roots, celebrating success, rewarding people. You look at any of their stuff on LinkedIn, and you can say they clearly reward people for doing a great job. They invest in training heavily. They've got great tech. They're supporting their people in front office with great tech. So they're doing all the right things. And they've come back to who they are. They're finding their identity again. I think it's brilliant to see. There'll always be a special place in my heart for Foxtons. So I spent 5 years there, and it's a great business.
Well, it's a cult in the best possible way, isn't it? So I think
I love a cult. I love a cult.
Keep it clean. So Sunday is the day of rest. So just you mentioned Luke there, obviously. Who else? And obviously you pay back Peter the compliments. Who else stands out for you in the industry that you think they're doing interesting stuff that you listen to?
So there's quite a few people. I think in terms of people on the front line, of course, apart from you two gentlemen. I worked alongside Lisa Jane Kelly, who's now at Savills, when she owned M&P alongside Peter. She taught me so much about people, about making sure that you're managing people in the right way and getting the best out of them. She's absolutely fabulous at that. There's some people who I think are in the broker space who are doing some great things at the moment. Scott Gunn, I've got a lot of admiration for. I think he's very open and honest about the work he does, which is really interesting. Tony Morris, trainer Tony Morris, I think is absolutely brilliant in the estate agency space. He brings ideas from outside of the industry into our industry, and my God, that needs to happen more because we're just like a little cocoon, this industry. Guy Gittins, huge admiration for. There's quite a lot out there.
I was going to say we always have to limit it because otherwise it resembles an Oscar speech. But it's always interesting to see some of the people that obviously because they help. I think that helps you get a perspective of the person as well from there. And going on the flip side, obviously we're very selfishly and focused on the supplier side of things, tech, but all suppliers. You mentioned at the top there, obviously, brand and people, but supporting all of those underlying it are the tools of the job. What for you are the tools that stand out for you in the business? Okay,
so from a tech perspective, we use Repit, and I know we will laugh about there are some limitations. It's a brilliant CRM. In terms of what it needs us to do, which is to be able to make sure that we have got a nurture journey for our clients, and we can chase deals and chase valuations and report and monitor. It's brilliant. There are some things they could tidy up on it, of course, like all platforms. But I've got a lot of time for Repit. Having started this business, my first costly mistake, I started this business on a different CRM, and I changed after 6 months. Now that cost me a lot of money, but worth it.
I always talk about it that the CRM is the foundation of your business from a tech perspective, at least, isn't it? And what you just highlighted there is that it's absolutely vital before you start adding other things into your tech stack that you get that foundation right. And that's where a system like Repit has to be, your first and most important purchase, isn't it?
100%. And if you're going with people that are big in the marketplace, it's much easier to obviously get the plugins and the work needed to get other suppliers on board. We work with a company called Integrated Interest for our e-marketing solutions. Fantastic, full force over there. Really helped us out getting some bespoke stuff together and looking at those nurture journeys for our clients at different touch points of the journey. There's quite a lot of suppliers I'm looking at changing at the moment because I think that. Frankly, I think that people are putting their prices up. Fine, you've got to make sure that you're delivering a service at the same time. And if you can't deliver a service that works for the business, then you can't put your prices up and expect to get away with it.
No, Ben, I think that's really so. You're obviously a fantastic. We're really pleased to have you as a Kerfuffle member. And how do you? A part of what we talk about is having those honest conversations with your supplier partners. And look, they're as hit by the cost of living crisis as often actually tech wages are going up exponentially even more. So they'd argue there. But how do you? They can't operate in a commercial vacuum. What's the conversation that you have with them, what you want to have with them when they put up their prices as a way of saying, look, guys, we don't need to do it.
And sub-question, it must be harder to break up with a supplier who you get on with personally, i.e. put the time in with that relationship.
Yes, but business is business, and at the end of the day, it's got to work for you. So yeah, because we have great relationships with our partners, with our suppliers. I think the problem comes where you've actually what's happened. It becomes a value thing, right? Any price is about value. It's cost and value. So it doesn't matter what you're charging somebody. It's whether they're getting good value out of it. Okay. Same as whether we're charging 0.8%, which we wouldn't dream of, or 1.5%. We're more expensive than other agents, but we're better value, I believe. So if you're not delivering value, then it's easier to stomach as a client if you're not charging much. When you start raising your prices, that's when people start looking at value. And I think regardless of everybody's cost of living crisis, and all of our costs are going up. So and we're looking at how we continue to develop our fee structure. We've got to give more. We can't just say, right, we used to provide something at 1.2%, now we're going to charge 1.5%. What are we going to give to them? How are we going to offer a better service, a better value? You've got to give more. And I think it's just too easy to get an email through that gets lost in everything saying, we're putting our prices up. And that's the way to deliver something from a supplier. Not for me.
It has to be done as a conversation. I firmly believe, doesn't it? I mean, I don't. You need to explain why you're doing it, but also, as you said there, the ideal way of doing it is yes, we are going to have to do that, but here's what more we're going to do for you to make that work. Because if you're not already getting the ROI from something at that price point and it goes up to there, that's when those difficult conversations come, whether it disappears entirely, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Really interesting. Really interesting. Mincy, could you get that story up? Because I don't know if you guys saw it, and I always really enjoy his articles, Paul. I know he's obviously, some people would say he's a bit Marmite, but I always just think that's people who've got strong opinions. And he comes across very, very Russell Quirk in the kind of strength of what he said. But he kicked off his article this week, I thought, just talking about obviously, 2023 wasn't the best of years. Transactions down by over 20%, as you could probably see there. He makes quite an interesting point about he expects 2024 to be cautiously optimistic, and he expects to see an uplift back almost up to there by 15%, and that he reckons that's going to be aided by prices dropping off by 5% across the board there. First of all, Ben, where do you come from that point of view? He goes through a whole host of other things we're going to talk about there, but just that kind of, what does 2024 offer in terms of the market? How do you see that?
I think it's bang on. Cautious optimism is exactly where we should be looking at. We've already seen it. Demand activity levels are way up on what we expect for this time of year, way up on last year. I think there's still some price adjustments to happen in the market. I think they're probably more to do with some asking prices at the moment being a bit too high and historically coming over from the back end of last year. I actually think clients, if you're doing a good job for them, are very aware of what's happened over the last year. And we've probably seen, whatever it is, you read one story 1 minute and they say we've seen a 0.2% drop, and then the next one we've seen a 20% drop. We've seen probably about 10 to 12%, I guess, across our network over the last 18 months. Has it got a little bit further to go? Maybe a little bit, but I don't think much. I actually think we're going to see prices strengthen towards the back end of the year. Okay. Mortgage rates are, you've got sub 4% 5 years coming out. It's a much more sensible environment for people to buy in. So many people have been waiting. But those reasons for moving, if we just remember why we're estate agents, those reasons for moving haven't changed. So if somebody's held off for a year because they couldn't afford the 6% mortgage, understandable. Their new child's a year older. Their marriage is 1 year closer and they want to get a bigger house. Their retirement's 1 year sooner. It's these reasons for moving don't change. So people will just get on with it. And I think everybody sees the environment we're in at the moment as a pretty sensible financial environment to be buying in. We're back to a bit more normality. So I'm feeling probably more optimistic than most, but I'm an optimistic person as well. So I think we're seeing great starts of the year.
Without getting, don't need to look political about it. What part do you think the election will have to play, if any? Because normally there's a bit of when it's announced, there tends to be a bit of a sort of a pause, doesn't there? It's what do you think? Will it have any impact, or is it largely going to not affect the market?
It always has an impact. I think it has less of an impact as we see more of them, and I think that it's sentiment. We always know it's down to sentiment and confidence. So, it depends what it does to the market. I think because we've had a period of a challenging period where the financial markets and interest rates have been so topsy-turvy for the last year, I think that's probably taken a sting out of what the election could have done to the market. But there'll be an effect. There always is. But again, it's our job as estate agents to make that market and explain to people why it's a good time to buy, a good time to sell, a good time to rent or let.
Cool. And he goes on, I've made you big there. I don't know what have I done there? Right, there we are. That's better. Oh, no, that's even worse. He also goes on to make the point as well about CoStar, he reckons, will knock Rightmove off its pedestal following their 99 acquisition. Do you get involved in those portal debates? Is it just something that's just happening out there, or are you watching it with a keen eye?
It would be great if there was a more competitive landscape, and there's not at the moment. And that means for agents, we have a good product in Rightmove, but it does mean it's expensive. And until there's somebody who comes along and genuinely challenges them, those price conversations won't happen. I think something will change at one point. There's two things to consider. One, unless the public start using it, it won't matter. Because that's what it's driven by,
isn't it? That is the key point.
They need users. Unless you've got everybody using it, it just doesn't matter. They can do whatever they want. So they're going to have you. And we've seen before with a couple of other players. You've got to put an awful lot of money into something to get public usage up at the levels you need it. So I think they've got a shot, but whether that happens, I don't know. I think the thing that will trip Rightmove up, and I've said this before, I don't think they're innovative enough. With how people want to search, the idea of how we search or how we ask for evaluation through Rightmove, through all the portals, is just so antiquated. People want to just talk.
How would you change that then without giving them an instant win? How would you see that journey? Because I think you're right. The key is that loads of house moves, the majority of house moves, will start with somebody going to have a look at Rightmove to find out what's going on in the market, how far their money will go, and all searches begin that way. And you need that awareness of the brand to be out there amongst buyers, first of all, for them to come to you. But when the buyer actually hits that screen, what journey do you want them to follow?
They just need something a bit more tech advanced. If you think about how people use, these now, you want to be on your phone on Rightmove or on any of the portals, and you want to just literally say, I'm looking for a 4-bedroom house with a garage within 15 minutes of here. Okay. At the moment, you can't really do that properly. You want to be able to pick it up and say, I'd like a valuation from an agent who's got 5-star Google reviews within 10 minutes of my house. That's where AI comes in. And that platform needs to be developed, because the idea of filling in forms and getting a contact back from an agent, it's just people want things now. They want to see it. You know, so I think that Rightmove's here to stay. I don't think they're going to get seriously challenged very quickly, but I do think they need to innovate.
Interesting feedback. Do you think they get trapped? Because I don't hear too many when you talk to members of the public. I don't hear too many of them saying Rightmove needs to innovate, because I think they understand, they believe that that's all of the stock on there, which is the main reason they go there for. So do you think that creates the problem for Rightmove, that why break something that isn't broken? That's their concern. And I agree with you. I think they should be braver. But do you think that's a large reason why they don't, on the face of it, appear innovative?
Well, they don't need to be at the moment. They don't need to be. You know, they do good things. Let's get real. You know, they produce an awful lot of quality leads for agents, but they don't need to do it whilst they've got a monopoly. The question about whether the public want it, I don't think the public as a whole ever really know what they want until it's then presented to them. So you look at innovation through Facebook or Instagram or TikTok, and they say, God, that's an amazing feature. You think, why didn't I think of that? Or the new invention that comes out, you think, oh God, I could have made millions off that. You don't think of it because you just don't think of it. But we've got to keep innovating, in everything we do, and I think that's what I'd like to see. But CoStar, let's see how it pans out. I think they're going to need an awful lot of money to get public recognition.
They've got it, and I think the team. Yeah. What was Megan's comment there, David? That looked quite interesting. That was just the flip side of his view.
So I think Megan just giving sort of an agent's perspective, that I actually feel if you use all the Rightmove tools, it makes the cost more palatable. And what I mean by that is the training side of it. But the mobile app, which most consumers use, is pretty rubbish. So Ben's right, a mobile is so vital. So that experience from the sort of end beneficiary of the service is a little bit basic. And I think genuinely most home searchers don't know what they're missing out on. They've just been served the same format, the same crap for years. So they don't know any different. They'll go off to some of the challenger sites, and it's all been built pretty much of trying to mimic a Rightmove platform. So we've got this very much sameness across all the platforms. Zoopla have had their estimates built into it, which I would argue has done more harm for agents over the years than help.
Mincy, and for you both, actually, do you think that the failure of Booming as a commercial enterprise, do you think that's put Rightmove and the others maybe off from innovating? Because clearly Booming was trying to do some really quite innovative stuff. Do you think they've mistakenly kind of said, well, actually, those guys tried to be innovative and it didn't work for them, and that's one of the reasons? Or is that...
I'm going to be a bit controversial, as I normally am when we talk about Booming, but I think one of the obstacles to Booming really sort of getting taken up by agents, to me anyway, and I don't expect either of you to agree with this, but it's the personalities behind the business. There was a large amount of distrust by the agent public in those two individuals particularly, and they had every reason in the world, really good reason, not to trust them. And the innovations that they introduced were probably a step in the right direction. Yeah. But when it involves giving over the only commodity that we have as agents, which is our data, when that data sharing becomes such a key part of that agreement, then I think you need to be able to trust the people behind the business in order to do it. So I think Booming was off to sort of a bit of a bad start from the beginning because they had this cloud over them. Now, all sorts of things happened around the time that Booming came to the market, which perhaps, some very cynically would say was designed to sort of reposition the reputations of those individuals behind the business. But I think if you talk to agents, that's always what comes up. But the innovation and the prospect of them innovating was good. I'm not so sure I was into being able to sell lamps to people to put in their rooms and stuff. To me, that wasn't necessarily what it was all about. But as Ben said, it was just giving the consumer perhaps something else to focus on other than just, here's your listing, click on this button and fill in a form. And I think that is the key to it.
I'd have bought a lamp if it was one of those brilliant hat and home lamps. That's absolutely for sure. Have you thought about merch, Ben?
Yeah, everything's for sale, Simon. You make me offer.
Oh, I like it. Okay, I will do. We'll talk afterwards. And so what does Christian say there as well? He's just got a couple of comments, hasn't he? What's he said there?
Yeah, so Christian says, until someone reimagines what a portal is and does, nothing will change. However, any innovation in the space needs market share, and consumers won't return to a site with 20% of the market listed. And I think that's really, really, really key. We get approached all the time by sort of challenger portals that are starting up. And do you know what? I sit down with them and they're all really great people. They're well-intentioned. And they'll always tell you the same thing. We need agents to give us the properties. When we've got the properties, the public will come. But we need that kind of leap of faith from the agents to stick with us during that nascent period whilst it's being set up. And I don't think agents have got the time or the patience necessarily to support new ventures like that. They don't want to be seen to be advertising on a portal that is restricted to, as Christian said, perhaps only 20% of the marketplace.
Yeah, that's illustrative.
Talking of that booming story, then obviously we had this week the story of booming being cleared up from the administration point of view, and I think the IP for most of their tech has already been bought by another one of the Bruce's companies. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with that going forward, because they did spend a lot of money and a lot of time developing whatever it was that they were developing there.
I thought some of it looked great. I think it was, as you said, but it's got to. The problem is, it's like a nuclear submarine. You've got to have both the audience and the innovation, haven't you? Being turned at the same time, and it's really hard. And I think it's just really hard for a lot of suppliers to. You understandably, a lot of them will launch free, but moving from that free stage to that paying stage is really challenging, because people will always say, well, actually, I'm not going to pay and you need my business. And so you're caught in that kind of game of chicken, aren't you?
Talking of chickens, can I make a segue over to something that you spotted today on social media? So I'm going to put this up on the screen and we'll kind of try and follow the story, and Simon might fill in some of the blanks here. But here's a post from Charlie Landon, who is calling time out with a combined 60,000 plus subscribers or followers across all platforms, most of whom are interested in discovering whatever they can do to help their move. I no longer have the time to debate anything except matters affecting the housing market on my home moving audience, because it takes time away from the majority of followers I am here to serve. I don't care what people who know me think of me, so you can imagine how little I care what strangers think. I'm not here to make friends or to be liked, although I always welcome new contacts. So he goes on to say, in the rest of his message, I repeatedly tell my audience not to believe or rely on anything I say, but if it's relevant, at least consider it before dismissing it. Sometimes that process will be valuable. But on balance, your feedback is that it's mostly helpful, thought-provoking content for my 25 years in the moving industry. I welcome constructive challenges and disagreements. At least one of us will learn something each time, and that's positive. I care about helping as many people as possible to overcome the difficulties of moving home, move on with their life, and do so without being disadvantaged by unscrupulous person. Now, his 2024 resolution, and this is the important bit, don't get drawn into cockfights with insecure individuals on trivial topics who are more interested in feeling clever than helping people. Well, I've got to say, that's a real challenge he's thrown down there to the rest of the industry. First of all, I've got to award Charlie our first ever award. We've never done this before, but he's right. Don't get involved in cockfights, and therefore, Charlie, you are.
Oh, we've gone GB News.
We've gone total GB News. This is a man that famously has spent time picking fights with people on Twitter and across all social media. And his approach, for people that don't know, his approach is basically doom and gloom. He's been talking the market down now for 2 or 3 years, that everything's going to end in tears and it's a crash. Now, he says he's giving a bit of realism to that audience, but must still won't go on a date with him. But it's interesting that he's declared himself out of that. So what is he now going to do with his time, Simon?
I don't know. So I think one of the challenges you've got now, isn't it, is that after seeing the likes of a Donald Trump and everything else there, and these people that just chase remorselessly that audience and become really, really polarized, that's what we're witnessing here again, isn't it? It seems to me. And he's found a niche, obviously, hitting that audience about people who are having a pop at the market and panic doom-mongers and all the rest of it. And he's just going down the rabbit hole from what I can see.
Where does it end? See, what I love about Ben is he's gone completely quiet on this, which is that, that's this quiet diplomat going.
He's not. He doesn't want any cockfights. Oh, that sounds even worse, actually. No.
Talking of which, then, Ben, maybe can I ask you a different question? Social media, then, being so important these days, and this question comes up time and time again when I'm talking to agents, particularly from a management point of view. You encourage your staff to get involved on social media. Do you have any kind of policing of what they're putting out on social media? Does it worry you sometimes that there is that ability to very quickly take a conversation off in the wrong direction that will affect the business?
If you get the right people, they'll do the right thing. And we do talk about our social media and what people are posting on their own accounts. At the end of the day, it's their own account. If they're posting on behalf of Hatton Home, that's something that we don't really encourage. They can have, anybody can have their own views, crack on. But you've got to think about, we live in a world where your own views on social media are not isolated anymore. So you've got to be prepared for your employers to see them. You've got to be prepared for your customers to see them, your peers to see them. And if you're not comfortable with those people seeing them, you shouldn't be saying it in the first place. You can't just hide in that corner. So I think if you've got the right people, they engage with the right debates and they do the right thing. We have a strategic social media policy that means that we post everything. So we don't encourage our people to go out and post on behalf of Hatton Home. Share our stuff, engage, have your own personal brand, be an industry thought leader. It's all those things are brilliant, but you can't stop people's voice.
Did you guys, I don't know if you caught Ben Madden's great webinar that he does, Pass the Syrup, and he had Matt Baldock, Rowan from College and County, and Alice from Nested Estate Agents. And one of the interesting angles they were talking about was that they were talking about potentially replacing door knocking with social media marketing. What do you think about that, Ben? Is that a step too far? Is it all about a blend? What's your approach?
They're two different things, aren't they? That's like saying you're going to replace your apples in your weekly shop with mints. It's just
nothing wrong with a bit of mint in your diet.
No, we love mints. They're two totally different things. Yeah. Every bit of marketing you do and every bit of brand awareness, it's about brand awareness. It's so that when somebody goes, I think I'm going to move, they call you, and then that process of valuation starts. So all marketing drives to one thing. Do they have brand awareness enough that they're going to call you at the time they decide to move? So social media plays a part, door knocking plays a part, direct mail plays a part, testimonials play a part, Google reviews, it all plays a part. But to say one outstrips the other, no. I have, door knocking. I think it has its benefits, and I think it can fall flat in its face sometimes. But if you do it in the right way, it can land very well. It's not something I've ever done in my career before until Hatton Home. My people actually drove the conversation and said, look, we want to go out there and knock some doors. 75% of my team are female. And that actually does make a difference on door knocking because whether they should or not, they have a slightly less guarded response when they're knocking on the door. And they're brilliant. They're going to, that's all you need, whether they're female or male. If you get the opportunity, you're fine.
That's the point. When you're door knocking, you are, to a certain extent, invading somebody's personal space, isn't it? It's their home. It's probably the place where they feel safer. So it doesn't surprise me that they necessarily are, more open to talking to somebody that perhaps represents a friendlier face. I don't know, and that's nothing to do with the way people look. It's more to do with the way that people act and behave. And yeah, I can see that. What do they do? You know, when you door knock now, is that now part of their regime, or do you leave it to them to choose how often to do it?
We talk. Every market's different, and every street in your market is going to behave differently to a different type of marketing. You know, you're going to attract social media with some people, door knocking with other people. You're going to a well-worded letter on one street is going to get a very different response to the same letter on another street. So you've got to understand where door knocking fits into your marketing strategy, and it fits differently for every office. So you know, it's
I assume, Ben, though, that telephone prospecting is key across all markets.
Oh, get on the phone. Get on the phone. Get off your email and get on the phone. I love it. You know, and you can't do anything better than be on the phone. You know, and people do pick up your calls, and they will pick up your calls. And you know, you might get there by texting them first or emailing them first, but get on the phone and talk to people.
It's the biggest differentiator. Right? Just if you were to really go for some really basic metrics about a successful agent, it's the ones, you know, you mentioned the buzz of an office when you walk. I can tell 2 minutes after walking into an office. Sorry, not 2 minutes, 2 seconds, as to whether this is a market leader or not. Because those difference that when you can feel the buzz, you can hear the noise. You know, you can hear people on the phones. Whereas those ones that are just kicking their heels and, like, you know, on their computer looking at Facebook, they're just not going to cut it, are they?
Yeah, try. And do you know what? It's for the same reason that when we register people when they ring our office, either for evaluation or as an applicant, we still do it on paper, because I don't want my people tapping away, because it's all you can hear is that person on the other end of the phone. Bit antiquated, but that's what we do.
Brilliant.
So Ben,
sorry, go on. You got a
we're going to say goodbye now, because we've been going now for a little over an hour. Before we do, Ben, what's your one tip for this week that people should be doing, that agents should be concentrating on?
One tip for this week: get in touch with people. Whatever your job is in that agency, call people, get in touch with them, say hello, ask them what their plans are, and make sure that you're part of their decision-making process. Just talk to people. Ring more people this week than you've rang last week, but less than you're going to ring next week.
Lovely. Ben, just talking to people, we want to, obviously, for those people that are interested in backing you, obviously getting involved with your with the new thing, as we said, we're going to be launching on the site, obviously get in contact with us, me and Mincy, directly. But how can they reach out to you directly, Ben, on it?
Reach out to me directly on LinkedIn. I always answer my messages. We're going to be setting up the website, and I'll make sure that's launched over social media so you guys can see it. Or if you get in touch with David or Simon, they can point in your direction. You'll see more on our community page of hattonhome.co.uk, which will be updated shortly as well. So it's in its infancy, but we're going to go quickly like we normally do on all this stuff. And I'll make sure that I'll be knocking on some agents' doors to come and say hello.
Well, hats off to you, Ben. I've been dying to get that in for the last hour. Amazing business, amazing person. Thank you so much for spending your Sunday with us, Ben, and we'll hear from you soon.
Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate it.
Take care.